Mason was 38 years old, made $62,000 a year as a ground crew chief at Denver International Airport, and was, at this exact moment, listening to his marriage die. It wasn't a loud, crashing death. It was a death by 1,000 cuts, delivered in a calm, melodic voice, from a list written on expensive cream-colored stationery. The paper probably cost $5 a sheet. It was Sunday morning, 8:03 a.m., sunlight thin and pale, sliced through the large kitchen window of their Park Hill home, a restored 1920s bungalow that had cost him, $1.2 million. The light caught the diamond on his wife's hand, a 3-carat stone he'd paid $94,000 for, and scattered tiny, cold rainbows across the granite countertop. Janae sat opposite him at the custom-built oak table, a piece she'd commissioned for $12,000. She wore a silk robe, a deep emerald green that made her luminous brown skin glow. It had cost $900. She hadn't made coffee. She'd simply sat down, placed the single sheet of paper in front of her, and said, "Mason, we need to talk about the future of this relationship. I've made a list of conditions, 10 of them, non-negotiable." He had just come in from his morning run, still in his 5-year-old New Balance running shoes, and a gray, sweat-dampened t-shirt that had probably cost $20 at Kohl's. He felt the chill of the air conditioning on his skin, a stark contrast to the heat building in his chest. He said nothing. He just watched her, his expression placid, his hands resting on his knees. He had known this was coming, he just hadn't known the exact script. Now, he was getting it, word for word. "First," Janny began, her voice devoid of any emotion except a chilling sort of transactional boredom, "you will initiate a wire transfer of $500,000 from your inheritance account to a new personal account that will be in my name only. This is for my security and to fund the gallery's expansion." Mason's parents, both public school teachers, had lived frugally, invested wisely, and passed away 2 years ago within 6 months of each other. They had left him their modest home, which he'd sold, and a portfolio worth $1.5 million. That money had bought this house, paid for Jana's Lodo Art Gallery lease, and funded her entire lifestyle. Of that inheritance, about $600,000 remained in a brokerage account. She was demanding almost all of it. He simply nodded, his eyes fixed on her face. He was a sturdy, quiet black man, with a neat fade and calloused hands that could guide a 300-ton Airbus into its gate in a blizzard. He was not a man given to dramatics. His stillness seemed to encourage her. "Second," she continued, glancing down at her list, "you will cease all communication with your sister, Tasha, permanently. Her negativity and working-class mindset are a drain on our potential." A muscle in Mason's jaw twitched. Tasha, a single mom who worked as a nurse, was the only family he had left. She was the one who called him after a long shift just to see if he was okay. She was the one whose son, his nephew, he was helping put through community college. "Third," Janae said, turning the invisible knife, "you will establish an annual stipend of $50,000 for my father. He sacrificed so much for me, and it's time he was comfortable." Her father was a 65-year-old man who had worked a series of odd jobs and had a notable talent for losing money on bad investments. Mason thought of his own father, who had worked 2 jobs for 30 years, driving a school bus in the mornings before teaching history all day, just to build the very nest egg Janae was now carving up like a Thanksgiving turkey. The outrage was a physical thing, a hot, metallic taste in the back of his throat. But his face remained a mask of calm. He had to stay calm. Everything depended on it. What was about to happen here was not a negotiation. It was the final scene of a play he had been rehearsing in his mind for 48 agonizing hours. And Janny had no idea she was the one walking into a trap. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew a storm was coming, but everyone else thought it was a beautiful day? Tell us about that feeling in the comments below. We've all been there, and your story matters. Janai, misinterpreting his silence as cowed acceptance, pressed on, a faint, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She had no idea what was already in motion, what one simple envelope in his gym bag contained. She had no idea that her carefully constructed list of demands was already obsolete. The facade had been expertly built, mostly by Janai. Their life, to any outside observer, was a portrait of aspirational success. The Park Hill home was featured in a local design magazine. Janai's gallery, Devereaux Contemporary, was a chic, minimalist space in Lodo, the trendy, expensive heart of Denver's art scene. She hosted openings with $15 glasses of Prosecco and tiny, unidentifiable appetizers on black slate trays. Mason would attend, standing awkwardly in his one good suit, a $250 Navy number from Men's Warehouse, while Janai mingled in a $2,000 dress, her laughter echoing in the high-ceilinged room. She referred to his job as Mason's little hobby at the airport. She never said it with overt malice, but with a dismissive wave of her hand, as if he were a child who collected stamps. "Oh, he just loves the big planes," she'd say to her friends, a circle of women who measured worth in European car brands and the square footage of their vacation homes in Aspen. Their domestic life was a series of carefully curated scenes. On Saturdays, Janai would go to the Cherry Creek Farmers Market and spend $200 on organic vegetables and artisanal cheeses. She'd arrange them in a rustic wooden bowl on the counter for an Instagram photo, hashtagged Simple Living. By Tuesday, the $50 bunch of kale would be wilted in the crisper, and she'd order $120 worth of sushi from Uchi. Mason's life was one of concrete realities. His day started at 4:30 a.m. His work boots were Red Wings, Model 2412, waterproof and steel-toed, costing $280 and worth every cent when you were on the tarmac in a February ice storm. His lunch was packed in a 10-year-old Igloo cooler, a turkey sandwich, an apple, and a thermos of black coffee. The roar of a 777 engine spooling up was the soundtrack to his day, a sound he found deeply satisfying. It was the sound of order, power, and purpose. He remembered one evening, about a year ago, he'd come home, exhausted after a 12-hour shift dealing with de-icing fluid shortages and a backed-up departure schedule. He walked into the living room to find Janai and two of her friends admiring a new painting on the wall. It was a chaotic swirl of black and gray, about 6 feet tall. "Isn't it magnificent?" Janai had said, her eyes shining. "It's by a new artist from Berlin. It's called Urban Deconstruction." "What do you think, Mason?" One of her friends, a woman named Chloe, who wore a $4,000 Chanel jacket, had asked. Mason looked at the painting. It looked like a tire had exploded on a canvas. "How much was it?" he asked. It was his first thought, always. Janai's smile tightened. "It's not about the cost, Mason. It's an investment. It's about cultural currency." "How much?" he repeated, his voice quiet. $42,000, she said, the words clipped. $42,000? That was 2/3 of his annual salary. It was a down payment on a house for a normal person. It was more than his father had made in his first 3 years of teaching. He didn't say any of this. He just nodded, took off his worn Carhartt jacket, and went to the kitchen to find something to eat. The $200 organic vegetables were still in the fridge, untouched. He made himself a bowl of cereal. The silence from the living room was louder than any jet engine. The contrast was everywhere. Her car was an $80,000 BMW X3, leased for $900 a month. His was a 2018 Ford Ranger he'd bought used for $22,000. Its bed scratched from hauling lumber for his sister's new deck. Her closet was a climate-controlled walk-in filled with designer labels, Burberry, Gucci, Prada, an inventory that could probably fetch $100,000 on the real. His closet held his airport uniforms, a half-dozen flannel shirts, and jeans. He paid for it all. The mortgage, the utilities, the car lease, the gallery's $5,000 monthly rent, her $300 haircuts, the $1,000 a month credit card bills filled with charges from spas and boutiques. He did it because he had loved her, and because he believed in the promise he had made. He believed in the facade himself for a time. He thought her happiness would eventually become his own. He had no idea how wrong he was. The foundation of their life wasn't love or partnership. It was his inheritance, and the money was starting to run out. The cruelty began as small, careless remarks, but it escalated as the balance in his inheritance account dwindled. Janae's dismissiveness curdled into outright contempt. The outrage for Mason wasn't a single explosion. It was the slow, relentless accumulation of 1,000 moments of humiliation. It was the dinner parties where she'd tell the story of how they met, editing it for her audience. In her telling, she had rescued him from a life of obscurity. He was so simple, she'd say with a soft, pitying laugh. But I saw a diamond in the rough. Her friends would coo, looking at Mason as if he were a piece of reclaimed furniture she'd artfully restored. He'd just sit there, sipping his water, feeling his skin crawl. One particularly brutal evening, about 6 months before the Sunday ultimatum, they were at a gallery fundraiser. Janae was talking to a potential patron, a wealthy property developer named Marcus Thorne. Mason was standing beside her, a silent accessory. "And my husband Mason, he works at the airport," Janie said, a little too brightly. Thorne, a man in an $8,000 Brioni suit, turned to Mason with a look of mild curiosity. "Oh, really? Management? Logistics?" "He directs the planes on the ground," Janae answered for him, her voice laced with a humor only she found amusing. "You know, with the little orange sticks." She made a comical motion, waving her hands around. Thorne gave a polite, confused chuckle. Mason felt the blood rush to his face. In that moment, in front of this stranger, she had reduced his profession, a job that required immense responsibility, technical knowledge, and calm under pressure, to a child's game. A job that ensured men like Marcus Thorne could fly their private jets safely. He felt 2 inches tall. He wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "It's a union job," Mason said, his voice level. "Good benefits, a pension." He said it just to say something real, something solid, in the face of her airy dismissal. Jana's smile froze. She touched his arm, her fingers pinching him just hard enough to be a warning. "He's such a pragmatist," she said to Thorne, steering the conversation back to a $20,000 sculpture. Mason excused himself and spent the rest of the evening by the bar, nursing a single club soda, the ice cubes clinking against the glass like tiny, distant alarm bells. The arguments at home became more frequent, always circling back to the same 2 themes: his lack of ambition and her need for more money. "The gallery needs a capital infusion, Mason," she said one night, scrolling through her iPad at the kitchen table. "I want to bring in a major international artist. It will require a $75,000 advance." "Janae, the account is not a bottomless well," he'd said, trying to be reasonable. "We've spent almost $1 million in 2 years on this house, on the gallery, on everything." She looked at him, her eyes cold. "It's your parents' money. Don't you think they would want me to be successful? To build something lasting? Or would they prefer you just keep it parked in some boring index fund while you play with your airplanes?" The mention of his parents was a deliberate, calculated cruelty. She was weaponizing their memory against him. "My parents believed in hard work, Jenny. They believed in living within your means." "Oh, please," she scoffed. throwing the $150 Apple Pencil onto the table. Don't give me the salt of the earth lecture. They were teachers in a flyover state. They had no vision. I do. You are holding me back, Mason. Your fear, your smallness, it's like an anchor. The worst, however, involved his sister. Tasha had never liked Jenny, a fact she made no effort to hide. She saw Jenny for exactly what she was. Tasha's visits to the Park Hill house were always tense. She'd walk in, her beautiful locks adorned with silver beads, wearing her comfortable nursing scrubs after a long shift, and look around the cavernous, art-filled living room with a skeptical eye. One Saturday, Tasha came over with a pot of her famous chili, a peace offering of sorts. Janae looked at the pot as if Tasha had brought a live animal into her pristine kitchen. "How thoughtful," Janae said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'm sure we can find a Tupperware for that. We're having sea bass tonight." She didn't offer Tasha any. Later, after Tasha left hurt and angry, Janae turned on Mason. "I don't want her in this house anymore. She brings this aura of struggle with her. It's depressing. And her son keeps calling you for money for his textbooks. It's tacky." "That's my nephew, Janae. And that's my sister, the only family I have," he'd yelled, his voice finally breaking its calm facade. "Family is a choice," she'd replied coolly, "and you need to choose the family that elevates you, not one that drags you down into their mediocrity." Each of these moments was a deposit into a bank of outrage. He was absorbing it all, the casual cruelty, the public humiliations, the attacks on his family and his profession. He was becoming saturated with it. He didn't realize it at the time, but this slow-burning anger was forging something new inside him. Not hatred, but a cold, hard resolve. He was still playing by the rules of their marriage, trying to fix what was broken. He didn't know that Janae had already thrown the rule book away and was writing a new one that would give her everything and leave him with nothing. And he was about to find that out. The discovery happened on a Thursday evening, 3 days before the Sunday ultimatum. It was 7:15 p.m., and a soft, persistent rain was falling over Denver, slicking the streets and blurring the city lights. Mason had just gotten home. His shift had been extended by 2 hours due to weather delays, and he was bone-tired. The house was quiet. Janae's BMW was gone, so he assumed she was at a gallery event or out with friends. He dropped his keys, which cost a total of $3 to copy at a hardware store, into the ceramic bowl on the entryway table. A bowl Janae had bought in Santa Fe for $400. He walked past the $42,000 painting and into the kitchen. The silence of the big house feeling less like peace and more like emptiness. He opened the Sub-Zero refrigerator, a $7,000 appliance, and found it mostly empty, save for a bottle of champagne and a jar of olives. He closed the door and decided to take a hot shower before scrounging for food. Upstairs, he walked past Janae's home office. The door was slightly ajar. He heard her voice, low and conspiratorial, and paused. He hadn't realized she was home. He was about to call out to her when he heard his sister's name. "Tasha is the first thing that has to go," Janae was saying. "He's got this pathetic codependent bond with her. I need it severed. Completely." Mason froze, his hand hovering near the doorknob. His heart started to pound, a slow, heavy drumbeat against his ribs. The rain outside seemed to fade into a dull hum. "No, Alicia, he won't see it coming," Janny said, a smug confidence in her voice. He realized she was on the phone with her sister. "He thinks I'm just a little frustrated. He has no idea how serious this is. I've been playing the part of the supportive, if slightly stressed wife for weeks." A short, sharp laugh. "He's so predictable. He'll get emotional. He'll want to talk it through. He'll try to negotiate." Mason leaned closer, pressing his ear to the small gap in the door. He felt like a spy in his own home. Every word he heard was a nail being hammered into the coffin of his marriage. "I've got the list all drafted," Janny continued. "I had a consultation with that lawyer Dad recommended, the Shark. He said the key is to present it as a post-nuptial agreement to save the marriage. It's legally stronger that way. It's not a threat. It's a solution." A lawyer. She had already seen a lawyer. The coldness of it all was breathtaking. "Okay, so here's the plan," Janny said, and Mason could hear the rustle of paper. "Sunday morning. I'll lay it all out. The $500,000 transfer is first. That's the shock and awe. While he's reeling from that, I hit him with cutting off Tasha, the stipend for Dad, and changing his name to Devereaux. Changing his name, his father's name, the absurdity of it, the sheer arrogance, was almost too much to process. The lawyer said to be firm, unemotional, and present it as a done deal. He'll fold. He's weak, Alicia. He has no spine. He just wants to keep the peace. By the time he processes it all, he'll have already agreed to the first few points. And the momentum will be on my side. The key is the ambush. No warning. He'll be too stunned to fight back effectively." Mason slowly, silently, backed away from the door. He felt a strange, terrifying calm descend over him. The anger was still there, a white-hot coal in his chest, but it was now encased in ice. The rain streaked down the hallway window, the world outside a watery blur. In that moment, everything became clear. The insults, the humiliations, her contempt. It wasn't just poor character. It was a strategy, a long-term plan to isolate him, bleed him dry, and then discard him. He walked into their master bedroom, the one with the $20,000 mattress and the view of the professionally landscaped garden, and saw his own reflection in the mirror. He saw a man who had been played for a fool. But the man looking back at him was not weak. He was not without a spine. He had just been operating under a different set of rules. Rules like loyalty, love, and honor. Now he knew the real rules of the game Janae was playing, and he knew with absolute certainty that he was going to win. He took a deep, steadying breath. The time for talking was over. The time for being hurt was over. The time for strategy had begun. He pulled out his phone, the screen a bright rectangle in the dim light. He didn't search for marriage counselors. He searched for best divorce attorney in Denver. Friday morning at 9 a.m., Mason was not on the tarmac at DIA. He was sitting in a leather wingback chair that probably cost more than his Ford Ranger's engine. He was in the downtown Denver office of Miller, Collins & Singh, a law firm whose name was etched in discreet gold leaf on a thick glass door. He had taken a sick day, the first one in 3 years. Mr. Jonathan Collins was a tall, impeccably dressed black man in his late 50s. He wore a crisp white shirt, a subtly patterned silk tie, and a suit that looked like it had been custom-made in London. It probably cost $10,000. He exuded an aura of calm, lethal competence. He listened to Mason's story without interruption, his hands steepled on his vast mahogany desk. On the desk sat a single, framed photo of him, with his wife and 2 daughters, all of them smiling. Mason recounted everything. The slow erosion of his marriage, Janae's spending, the public humiliations, and finally, the conversation he had overheard. He spoke in his usual quiet, measured tones, but Mr. Collins heard the steel beneath the surface. When Mason finished, the lawyer was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying Mason's face. "She called you weak," Mr. Collins said, his voice a low, resonant baritone. "She said you had no spine. She believes you will fold under pressure. This is her critical mistake, and it will be her undoing." He leaned forward. This is not a negotiation, Mason. This is a rescue mission. We are rescuing your assets, your dignity, and your future from a predator. Your wife has declared war. Our job is to win it for you, decisively and legally, before she even knows the first shot has been fired. The validation in those words was like a balm on a raw wound. What do we do? Mason asked, his voice hoarse. We act first. We act fast. And we act silently, Mr. Collins said, his energy shifting from pensive to kinetic. Today, right now, we will draft and file a petition for dissolution of marriage. We will simultaneously file for a temporary financial restraining order. This will freeze all marital assets, including your inheritance account, and prevent her from moving, selling, or borrowing against any property. The house, the cars, the bank accounts, all of it will be locked down as of the moment a judge signs this, which will be this afternoon. He continued, laying out the strategy like a battle plan. The petition and the TRO will be held by the process server. They will not be served to her yet. We wait for her to make her move. You said she plans to ambush you on Sunday morning? Mason nodded. Perfect, Collins said, a thin, cold smile on his face. She will walk into her own trap. She will read you her list of illegal and unenforceable demands. And in doing so, she will be creating evidence against herself. Evidence of extortionate intent. He picked up a pen. There's more. We will also issue a subpoena to her cell phone provider for all text message records between her and her sister, Alicia, for the past 90 days. Her little planning session? We're going to get a transcript of it. It will be Exhibit A in our filing, demonstrating bad faith and a conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Mason felt a wave of relief so profound it almost made him dizzy. He wasn't just fighting back. He was launching a preemptive strike based on pure, undeniable logic and law. What will this cost? Mason asked. My retainer is $15,000, Collins said without blinking. My hourly rate is $1,200. It will be the best money you have ever spent. We will file a motion for Janae to cover your legal fees, given her conduct. Okay, Mason said, pulling out the checkbook for his personal savings account, an account Janae knew nothing about, where he had been quietly stashing away a small portion of his salary for years. It held just over $20,000. He wrote the check for $15,000 and slid it across the desk. Mr. Collins nodded. My paralegal will get you started on the financial disclosures. Be meticulous. Every asset, every debt. We hide nothing. We are the party of transparency. Let her be the one with secrets. He stood up, extending a hand. Now you have one job, Mason. It's the hardest job of all. Go home, and for the next 48 hours, you act normal. You play the part of the loving, clueless husband. Let her believe she has you right where she wants you. Can you do that? Mason looked at the lawyer, the man who had just handed him back his power. He thought of Janae's smug laugh, of her calling him weak. Yes, Mason said, his voice steady and clear. I can do that. Playing dumb was the most excruciating performance of Mason's life. Every moment was a lie, layered with the heavy weight of what he knew. He left Mr. Collins's office and drove not home, but to his sister Tasha's small, tidy duplex in Aurora. He found her in the backyard, tending to her small vegetable garden. Her locks were tied up in a colorful scarf, and her hands were dark with rich soil. He told her everything. He watched her face shift from confusion to fury, to a fierce, protective love that made his throat tighten. That witch, Tasha breathed, wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. I knew it. I always knew it. What are you going to do? I did it already, he said, and he explained the plan. The petition, the freeze, the subpoena. Tasha's eyes widened. Then she threw her head back and laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "Oh, Mason, that's my brother. You got the quiet gene, but you got the smart gene too. That's Dad in you. He never raised his voice, but he always won the argument." She pulled him into a fierce hug. "Okay, you go home. You be a ghost. Let her think she's in control. I won't call. I won't text. I'll wait for your signal." Leaving his sister's house, Mason felt fortified. He was not alone in this. He got home around 5 p.m. on Friday. Janae's BMW was in the driveway. The rain had stopped, leaving the air smelling clean and fresh. He walked in, and she was in the kitchen, arranging flowers, $300 worth of lilies and orchids, in a vase. She was humming. "Hey, baby," she said, turning to kiss him. Her kiss felt like a spider on his cheek. "Long day?" "Yeah, weather was a mess," he said, his voice a perfect imitation of his usual weary tone. "You have a good day?" "It was wonderful," she said, her eyes bright and shining. "I think I secured a new patron for the gallery. Big things are happening, Mason. Big things for us. Us." The word was a lie, and they both knew it. But for different reasons. She was using it as a lure. He was hearing it as a threat. The dramatic irony was a suffocating blanket. They ate dinner together. She had cooked, a rare occurrence. It was a salmon dish with asparagus. It was delicious. She was being the perfect wife. She asked about his day, feigning interest in ramp closures and baggage handler disputes. He answered in his usual monosyllabic way. "You seem tired," she said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Her touch was electric, a jolt of revulsion he had to suppress. "Just a long week," he said. "Well, you should rest up this weekend," she said, her voice soft and suggestive. "I think we need to have a really important conversation on Sunday. About our future. About making things better." Foreshadowing. She thought she was being clever, setting the stage. He had to force himself not to flinch. "Okay," he said, nodding. "Sunday sounds good." Saturday was even worse. He spent the morning doing yard work, trimming the hedges and mowing the lawn of the $1.2 million house that was about to become a battleground. He felt like a groundskeeper on a volcano. Janae went out for what she called a spa day with Alicia. He knew she was having a final strategy session with her sister. He could picture them, sitting in plush robes at the Four Seasons spa, sipping cucumber water, finalizing the details of his destruction. The spa day would cost at least $1,000, charged to a credit card he paid. It would be one of the last charges she ever made on it. He ate lunch alone, a turkey sandwich just like the ones he ate at work. He sat at the $12,000 oak table in the cavernous, silent house and felt a profound sense of loneliness. For a moment, his resolve wavered. Was this the right path? The scorched earth approach? Then he thought of her words, overheard through the door. He's weak. He has no spine. He thought of her plan to sever him from Tasha, his only family. He thought of her demanding he change his father's name. The ice reformed around his heart. This wasn't revenge. This was survival. That evening, she came home glowing, relaxed, and affectionate. She suggested they watch a movie. They sat on the $6,000 custom sofa in the media room. She curled up against him, resting her head on his shoulder. He felt his entire body go rigid. He forced himself to relax, to put his arm around her. He smelled her perfume, a scent that cost $400 a bottle. It now smelled like betrayal. He stared at the screen, not seeing the film, just counting the hours until Sunday morning. Every tick of the clock was a countdown to detonation. Sunday morning, 8 a.m. The air in the kitchen was thick with unspoken intentions. The sun was brighter today, harsher. It fell across the oak table. illuminating the single sheet of cream-colored stationery, like a sacred text. Mason sat in his running clothes, a deliberate choice. He wanted to look like the man she underestimated, the simple man who worked with his hands. In his gym bag, leaning against his chair, was a single plain manila envelope. It felt as heavy as a bomb. Janae, in her $900 emerald silk robe, took a delicate sip of water from a crystal glass. She cleared her throat. The performance was beginning. As I said, Mason, I've given this a lot of thought. This isn't an attack. This is a roadmap to a better, more successful life for both of us. It requires some significant adjustments from you. Mason met her gaze. He kept his face neutral, a blank canvas for her to project her assumptions onto. I'm listening, he said. His voice was quiet. First, she began, her eyes on the list, the $500,000 wire transfer to my personal account. This needs to happen by noon tomorrow. Second, she continued, not waiting for a response, you will cease all communication with your sister, Tasha. I've already explained my reasons. Her influence is not productive for our goals. Third, the $50,000 annual stipend for my father, paid quarterly, beginning next month. Fourth, she said, and here her eyes lifted to meet his, a flicker of challenge in them. We will be changing your surname. You will legally become Mason Devereaux. It presents a more unified, powerful front for the brand I am building. Mason just nodded slowly. He could see the flash of triumph in her eyes. He was folding, just as she'd predicted. He was being weak. Fifth, she went on, her voice gaining confidence, you will resign from your position at the airport, effective immediately. Your new role will be business manager of the gallery. It is, of course, an unpaid position, your contribution to our joint success. Sixth, the title for this house will be transferred solely into my name. It's a matter of asset protection for the business. Seventh, you will sell your truck. It's an eyesore. We will share my BMW. I will, of course, have priority. He felt a strange sense of detachment, as if he were watching a movie. He could see the scene exactly as Mr. Collins had described it. She was creating evidence of her own bad faith, word by word. Eighth, she said, her tone becoming almost breezy, we will operate on a strict lifestyle budget of $15,000 per month, which I will manage. This covers all clothing, dining, travel, and entertainment. Ninth, you will be required to attend all my professional and social functions. I will provide you with a list of approved conversation topics. Your wardrobe for these events will be subject to my approval. She paused, saving the most humiliating for last. And finally, 10th, you will post a public statement on your social media accounts. I have the text right here. She slid a second piece of paper across the table. He didn't look at it. He knew it would be some garbage about his past lack of vision and his newfound commitment to supporting Jana's artistic empire. She finished. She leaned back in her chair, a serene, queenly smile on her face. The trap had been set and sprung. She had laid out her terms. Now she waited for his surrender, for the negotiations to begin on the small points, the core demands already established in her mind. So, she said, her voice soft and magnanimous, do you have any questions? Mason was silent for a long, heavy moment. He looked at her, at the beautiful, expensive facade. He looked at the list of demands on the $5 paper. He thought of his parents, his sister, his job, his name. Everything she was trying to strip away from him. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He did not plead. He simply reached down into his gym bag and pulled out the plain manila envelope. He placed it on the table and slid it across the polished oak surface. It stopped directly in front of her. I have no questions, he said, his voice calm and even. But I believe this document answers yours. Janae stared at the envelope, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. This wasn't in her script. She picked it up. It was surprisingly thick. Her perfectly manicured fingers, the nails painted a deep crimson, fumbled with the flap. She pulled out the contents. The first page had the seal of the District Court of Denver. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Her face went white. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her luminous skin looking dull and waxy. Her mouth fell open slightly. What is this?" she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "It's a divorce petition," Mason said, his voice still quiet, still calm. "I filed it on Friday morning." Her eyes darted from the paper to his face and back again, disbelief warring with panic. She frantically shuffled to the next document, temporary financial restraining order. She scanned the legalese, her eyes widening in horror as she understood the words, all assets frozen. No transfers, no sales, no new debts. Her plan, her $500,000 transfer, her entire strategy was not just denied, it was dead. The accounts were already locked. "You can't," she stammered, her voice trembling. "How could you—" "Keep reading," Mason said. Her trembling hands went to the last, thickest part of the packet. It was a series of pages, stapled together. The header read, Exhibit A. Transcript of subpoenaed text messages. She saw the names at the top, Janny Devereaux and Alicia Devereaux. She saw the dates. She saw her own words, her own smug, cruel words, typed out in cold, black ink. "He's weak, Alicia. He has no spine. The key is the ambush. No warning. I had a consultation with that lawyer Dad recommended, the shark. He'll fold." She read the transcript of her entire plan, her conspiracy with her sister to fleece him, to isolate him, to break him. It was all there, every damning word. Janae looked up from the papers, her face a mask of utter devastation. The queen was gone. The confident, powerful woman in the silk robe was gone. In her place was a terrified, exposed stranger. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of a world collapsing. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She just stared at him, her eyes filled with a dawning, terrible understanding. She hadn't been the hunter. All along, she had been the prey. And the trap had just snapped shut. The collapse was not a single event, but a cascade of consequences, each one a direct result of the life Janae had built on a foundation of lies and Mason's money. The temporary financial restraining order was a guillotine that severed her from her lavish lifestyle instantly. The first domino fell Monday afternoon. Mason was at work, standing on the breezy expanse of the tarmac at DIA, the snow-capped Rockies a majestic backdrop. His phone, which had been silent all day, buzzed. It was a text from Janae. "My credit cards were just declined at Neiman Marcus, all of them." "What did you do? This is insane, Mason. Call me." He read the message and put the phone back in his pocket without replying. He looked up at the sky, a brilliant, cloudless blue, and took a deep breath of the cool, dry air. It was the first clean breath he'd taken in years. The next message came an hour later, more frantic. "I tried to pay the gallery rent. The account is frozen. The gallery account. Mason, this is my business. You are destroying my business. Call me now." He knew, because Mr. Collins had explained it, that since the gallery was funded entirely with marital assets, his inheritance, and had never turned a profit, it was considered a marital liability, not a separate business. It was frozen, along with everything else. Then came the voicemails. He listened to them that evening, sitting in his quiet Ford Ranger in the airport employee parking lot. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple. Voicemail 1, 3:15 p.m. Janae's voice, tight with anger. Mason, I have been calling you. You are playing a very, very stupid game. My lawyer will tear this ridiculous petition apart. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Voicemail 2, 4:30 p.m. Voice cracking, panic setting in. Okay, look, the list was just a starting point. A negotiation tactic. You can't be serious about this. A divorce? Over a conversation? You are blowing this completely out of proportion. You have to undo this freeze. The gallery's reputation will be ruined. Voicemail 3, 6 p.m. Pleading, the arrogance gone. Mason, please call me. We can talk about this. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. Not all of it. We can forget the list. We can go back to how things were. Please. But they could never go back. He knew that now. The person she was when she thought he was weak was the real Janae. The consequences rippled outward. Her father called her furious. The promised $50,000 annual stipend was not just gone. The very idea of it was now evidence against her in a divorce proceeding. He screamed at her for being so stupid as to get caught. Her sister, Alicia, was implicated directly by Exhibit A. Her own husband, a partner at a conservative accounting firm, was horrified that her name was attached to a legal document describing a conspiracy to commit financial fraud. The fallout in her own marriage was immediate and severe. Janae's patrons and friends from the art world began to distance themselves. The gallery, unable to pay its rent or its artists, was effectively shuttered overnight. The news of the asset freeze and the ugly divorce spread through the gossipy Lodo art scene like wildfire. Janae, the curator of cultural currency, was suddenly bankrupt, financially and socially. The $42,000 urban deconstruction painting hanging in a house she could no longer access freely became a monument to her hubris. Within a week, she was forced to move out of the Park Hill house. She went to stay with her sister, a temporary and tense arrangement. The $80,000 BMW X3, being a marital asset under lease, was returned to the dealership by order of the court to stem the financial bleeding. Janae, the woman who found Mason's Ford Ranger to be an eyesore, was suddenly without a car. The legal process was swift and brutal. With the evidence of her extortionate demands and the premeditated ambush, she had no leverage. Mr. Collins was, as promised, a shark. He argued that Janae had engaged in a pattern of economic dissipation, wasting marital assets on a lifestyle and a vanity business they could not afford. The final settlement was devastating for her. The court awarded Mason the Park Hill house, recognizing it was purchased almost entirely with his separate, inherited property. He was ordered to buy out her small share of the equity, a sum of about $50,000, a far cry from the $500,000 she had demanded. The remainder of his inheritance was classified as his sole and separate property. She was awarded no alimony given the short duration of the marriage and her documented bad faith. She was, however, ordered to pay for half of Mason's $15,000 legal fees. She was left with her $50,000 buyout, a mountain of personal debt from her shopping habits, a ruined reputation, and a collection of designer clothes in storage. She had gambled everything on the belief that he was weak, and she had lost everything. 1 year later, the sun was warm on Mason's face. He stood on a rocky overlook on the Deer Creek Canyon Trail, the vast, silent expanse of the Rockies stretching out before him. The air was thin, crisp, and clean. Below, the aspen leaves had turned a brilliant, shimmering gold. It was a beauty that didn't require a price tag or a critical review. It just was. He wore a simple pair of hiking boots, a flannel shirt, and the same comfortable jeans he'd always owned. In his backpack was a thermos of coffee, a turkey sandwich, and an apple. He was alone, but he was not lonely. The silence of the mountains was a peaceful, healing presence. His life had been rebuilt, not on the grand scale Janae had envisioned, but on a foundation of solid, simple truths. He still lived in the Park Hill house. At first, it had felt haunted by memories, the ghost of a life that was a lie. But he had systematically erased her. He sold the $12,000 oak table and replaced it with a simple, sturdy one from a local craftsman. He sold the $42,000 painting to a consignment shop for a fraction of its cost and left the wall blank. He enjoyed the empty space. He had Tasha and his nephew over for dinner every Sunday. They ate her chili in the quiet, uncluttered dining room, their laughter filling the space. He still worked at DIA. He hadn't just kept his job. He had deepened his commitment to it. He'd been promoted to training supervisor. Now he spent part of his week in a classroom, mentoring new ground crew hires, young men and women starting their careers. He taught them the technical specifications of a 737 MAX, the proper hand signals for pushback, the importance of situational awareness on an active tarmac. But he also taught them about integrity, about taking pride in a job well done, about the quiet dignity of essential work. He was helping them get their certifications, building their futures. His $62,000 salary felt richer than any inheritance. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Tasha, a picture of his nephew standing in front of a classroom at Red Rocks Community College, holding up a certificate for completing his EMT training. He passed, thanks to his favorite uncle. Mason smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached his eyes. This was his legacy. Not a gallery, not a brand. A nephew who would save lives. A sister who was his rock. A job that mattered. As for Janny, he heard through the grapevine that she had moved to California. She was working as a personal shopper at a high-end department store in Beverly Hills, using her knowledge of luxury brands to earn a commission. She was living in a small rented apartment. He felt nothing hearing this. No anger, no satisfaction. Just a profound sense of distance. She was a character in a story from another lifetime. He took a sip of his coffee. It was strong and black, just how he liked it. He looked out at the mountains, at the endless blue sky. He had learned the hardest lesson of all, that some people see love as a partnership, and others see it as an acquisition. They will assess your value, your assets, your potential, and if they decide you are a good investment, they will try to acquire you. But when the assets run dry, so does the affection. True wealth isn't in a brokerage account or on a gallery wall. It's in the peace you feel when you wake up in the morning. It's in the love of a family that values you for who you are, not what you have. It's in the quiet satisfaction of a hard day's work and the freedom to walk your own path, under your own name. He had been stripped of his pride, but in the end, he had found something far more valuable: himself. The silence she had left in her wake had become his sanctuary. What does true wealth mean to you? Is it found in a bank account or somewhere else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story and your wisdom are part of this community, and we can all learn from each other.